Good morning! Hey, it's great to see all of you. Just excuse me, I decided, let me shave first, let me not shave first. I said, alright, you guys will be okay with the beard. So, got a little growth in here. But just wanted to say good morning. Also, I wanted to say, I got your research papers. I got a whole hell of a lot of them. So, hopefully the next few hours, I'll start reading them, I'll start grading them, and I'll start getting them back to you as soon as possible. And I look forward to reading them. One of the things I really like about Frontline is they've done a couple of really good programs on new media. And of course, you guys have the third one that I've used, which is Generation Like. I've used two previous when they first came out. I think my favorite, there were parts of the second one that really got me. Let me give you an idea what I'm talking about. And when you talk about how new media really went ahead and is turning everything around. They went to MIT, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Now, you don't know that. It's probably one of the smartest schools in the world. Not just in America, but I mean, you literally have to be a rocket scientist to get into MIT. I mean, MIT is very well world-renowned. And so they went into the student center, and there were about 45 to 50 students in their student center. Not one of them was engaged in a conversation with another one. Everyone had their faces buried, either in a phone, in a tablet, or in a laptop. All right. And this is, I think it did 2010 or 2011 is when they did this one. But then came this interview they did with an English professor at MIT. And he had what I still think, and I actually met the documentarian at a conference who did the PBS Frontline. He did the first two that I used to use. And I asked him about it because he interviewed this English professor. And this English professor said, I'll never forget what he said. He said, my students don't write papers anymore. They write paragraphs. Okay? And of course what he meant is that typically when a student sits down to write a paper, they write a paper. 5 pages, 10 pages, 15 pages. They get all their research together, they gather it up, they put up a rough draft, and then they write their paper. Whereas what he was saying was that they'll have their thoughts, they'll write a paragraph, and then you have to check their Twitter. They'll write a paragraph, then have to check their Facebook. Or their, I don't think Instagram was around at the time, but, whatever the social media was that they were using, they were constantly having to check everything. And that, to me, really made a lot of sense. They don't write papers anymore. They write paragraphs. So PBS Frontline has done some really good program. I have to look and search because I think we're about done with Generation Like, although it's still pretty consistent with what goes on today. I mean, the Instagram pictures that I see out there, it's just crazy. But some of the other things I'm not crazy about that happen out there, especially now I have a 5-year-old daughter, so I'm not crazy about some of the things that I see, and I wonder about some of the parents who allow this to go on with all this new media, with the streaming and everything else. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about some of the more recent news. Of course, we've got a lot of big movies that are going to be coming out soon as we get into the Thanksgiving weekend. Now, typically, for movie openings, Thanksgiving weekend's huge because you have 5 days. You'll typically open up the Wednesday night because nobody goes to work on Thursday, it's Thanksgiving. So you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as an opening weekend. And you've had some of the biggest blockbusters in the history of movies open up during this weekend. Especially, I think, a Spider-Man opened this weekend. I want to say a Lord of the Rings. I think even Titanic might have opened up on a Thanksgiving week. I don't really remember. But some big movies have made some huge, to walking away with like $80-90 million just in this 5-day weekend. So we're going to see some big movies coming out. But of course, what's also happening, thanks to COVID, is they're also simulcasting on a different platform, whether it's HBO Max, whether it's Amazon Prime. And again, one of the things that I had predicted many years ago, thanks to COVID, is finally starting to happen. I think we've talked about this before. I'm sure I've mentioned it. I mean, it's November. I must have mentioned it already. Where the theaters, the owners of the theater companies like AMC and Bow Tie and all of them and Regal, all have these deals with the movie studios to keep funneling movies into the studio, into the movie houses, okay, so that you have to go to a theater to watch, which is still a great experience. There is still nothing that beats going into that theater, that darkened theater, having that big screen with the major sound system, okay, and watching a movie there. You kind of close yourself out from the rest of the world. And we're going to talk about that later on in this chapter, about how that all started and where that really came to be. But, during COVID, people were starting to really like being able to stay home. Big screen 4K TVs are getting cheaper and cheaper. I've seen some really good prices on some of these 65-inch 4K TVs for like under $600. I mean, it's just blowing me away, the prices right now for some of these high-definition TVs. And I just checked the other day, the new James Bond movie is $19.99 on Amazon Prime. And again, this is the thing that I predicted, that instead of you having to go to a theater, you could buy it at home, and of course, it would cost you like $20 or $25 because you'd get 3 or 4 people gathered in the living room with you to watch it, or a Marvel movie or that kind of thing, and it would really be huge. And it's now starting to come to fruition, but we'll see what happens once people are able to really start packing them back. I know you can go to theaters in most places, but people simply don't want to sit in a theater with a mask on if they have to. So we'll see how far that goes. I know there's a big movie coming up that's going to be on, I believe, Disney Plus also, is the movie King Richard, where Will Smith plays, Richard Williams. Of course, the father of Venus and Serena Williams. And Serena, of course, is my all-time favorite female athlete. Just amazing what she's accomplished. So to see him, take his 2 girls and break through the tennis world in a very unique way, it's going to be a really good movie. Also, I believe also on Disney Plus. I think Will Smith, King Richard is on HBO Max, and then on Disney Plus is going to be the Beatles documentary. So there's a lot of big things coming out in the next week or so when it comes to movie releases. Now, radio-wise, of course, still the number 1 overall radio station in New York City is Light FM WLTW. Again, you can go to any desk, even if you happen to show up at Bergen, all right, go to see a secretary. She's got Light FM coming out of her computer. They're number 1, and they're number 1 by a good amount, but it's now going to start to be a runaway, because now we're into November, and now the Christmas music is coming out. And no one rules radio in America the way that Light FM rules the New York City radio market. Remember, we're the number 1 radio market in America. Los Angeles is number 2, Chicago is number 3, and I think LA is maybe half the size of the New York City radio market. Remember, we're in New York, New Jersey, Northern New Jersey, Connecticut. That's the New York City radio market. And it's got like 30 to 35 million people or something like that in the radio market. And Light FM will almost triple the number 2 station in the market in numbers once we get past Thanksgiving. So if you want to hear Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas Is You, just turn it on, 106.7, and it's going to be huge. My only drawback with this class is that you guys will be finished with this course weeks before the final numbers come out for December. But boy, I tell you what, they will literally triple the size of the audience of just the number 2 station. That's how really popular Light FM has become with the Christmas music, and especially as people are trying to get out of COVID. Boy, they can't wait for this Christmas music. Television. Very interesting what came out of last week. Now, Nielsen Company is the company that measures television ratings. All right, it's explained in the television chapter. What they'll do is they'll, send something to your house, or they'll come to your house, and it's this little box that they put on your TV that measures whatever it is that you watch, mostly just for the cable and broadcast networks. It used to even do the subscription, like if you were watching HBO or Showtime or something like that. It's a big reason how we knew how big and popular not only the Sopranos, but then later on HBO with Game of Thrones, how many people were watching those shows. But lately, of course, we've done nothing but streaming. A lot of people have left cable networks, they've left the broadcast networks, and they're just streaming whatever they want. Even if it's a show from, like if you like Chicago Fire, you may go to the Paramount Network, or not the Paramount app, or you might go to the Peacock app, or you might go someplace else where you'll watch it instead of watching it on television when it airs on CBS. On NBC, Chicago Fire. So, the measuring of shows has become crazy because so few shows are now even getting a couple of million people. With the exception, like I said, you get a Sunday night football game on NBC, Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, boom, you're pulling in 27 million people. And by the way, this past weekend I counted 39 college football games were broadcast where if you had cable or the broadcast networks, you could watch it. What that doesn't include is ESPN3. If there's a game that was not telecast on any of the channels that you have of the 39 that were originally aired, you could have watched it on your computer because it might have been broadcast locally. And just about every game now is broadcast. You can get every college team, even the Division III teams. If somebody's got a camera out there, it might even just, some of these Division III teams, like when I played at Kane, maybe Kane versus Montclair State, there might be just a 19-year-old intern standing up there with his iPhone. But you know what? You can tune into a computer, you can watch the stream, and usually it's in 4K. It's not bad. But this past week, the Season 4 premiere of the Paramount Network. Now, Paramount, which is under the guise of Viacom, where CBS is and a lot of other companies are, Paramount has its own cable network. And they've started producing their own programming. And the Season 4 premiere of Yellowstone, which stars legendary Hollywood actor Kevin Costner, actually drew in over 14.8 million people for a 2-hour premiere of Season 4. Yellowstone's become very popular. It's very well written. Of course, Kevin Costner brings in the big star power. A couple of other of the supporting actors, very well known, have done a lot of good things. So that's a huge number because none of these other broadcast network shows or cable networks, hell, you talk about even cable news. CNN last week averaged under 500,000 people per day. They were just at like 467,000. So when you've got a cable network, and again, on my cable, I have YouTube TV. So as I'm scrolling down YouTube TV, I got to go almost to the bottom near like where Cozy is and some kind of newsy channel that I've never heard of, and the Cheddar Network. I find the Paramount Network. That 14.8 million people found it on their cable, and what's more, what the executives are saying is that's not counting those who streamed it. There are some people who could have streamed it maybe within 24 hours after it aired, and that should be counted also. So that was a big accomplishment. It's going to be interesting to see, as we move out of COVID and all the streaming options are out there. Remember what that Netflix CEO said, and I sent you guys the article. We'll see how long the broadcast networks can survive. Live sports is where they're going to do it, and trust me when I tell you, we got a Winter Olympics coming soon. It's going to be in the People's Republic of China. A lot of people are looking for the U.S. to boycott that because of COVID. Not because of the disease itself, but that it was the Chinese that released it. But there's a lot of money invested. This past Summer Olympics, boy, with nobody in the stands at Tokyo, God, it just didn't do the ratings that it's done in the past. The Olympics are usually a very well-watched event every 4 years, whether it's the Summer Games or the Winter Games. They were not well-watched at all, especially with nobody in the stands. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Winter Olympics. And I don't even know if China is going to allow people to actually attend the events or not. It's going to be interesting to see. That's a lot of money that networks invest into securing the rights to broadcast both the Summer and the Winter Olympic Games. So let's talk about the movies. It's always interesting to me what comes out of a couple of guys sitting at a bar drinking. All kinds of weird things come out. So one day in 1878, a couple of guys are drinking at the bar. And just one says to the other, you know what? I think when a horse is running, at one time, all four hooves are off the ground at the same time. And the other guy says, bull crap, that doesn't happen. No horse is going to be able to have all four of its hooves off it doesn't happen. The other guy says, you want to bet? Yeah, I'll bet you like 100 pounds. Remember when England. So, the guy who he's making the bet with was a guy by the name of Edward Muybridge. Now, Edward Muybridge was a photographer. So, this is what Muybridge does. Goes down to a horse track. And we're going to take pictures of a horse running. But what we're going to do is this. Is every 10 to 20 feet, I'm going to have a different camera. We'll have like 16 or 18 cameras set up. And there's going to be a string. So as soon as the horse hits that string, the camera will take the picture. So they go ahead and they do that. Then they go ahead and they gather all the different pictures. And they start to look at them individually. And what do you think they're seeing? They're seeing a horse in motion as they were flipping the pictures. And you see that with that first clip that I provided for you. See, what that's referred to as is called persistence of vision. All right? What that is that when you're looking at a picture, and you then go to the next picture for at least 1 full second, in your eyes is the vision of the previous picture as you're seeing the next one. So now, if you're doing that at a rapid pace, you're seeing a picture, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one, of course you still have the vision of the previous one. So what ends up happening is when you're flipping these pictures that you're holding in a stack, it looks like the horse is running. As a matter of fact, if you look at the film clip down at the lower part of the pictures, you can see where each of them was numbered based on which camera was taking it. And yes, Muybridge did win the bet because there is one photo that you see where all four hooves are off the floor. But now the word about this persistence of vision and what we just saw is just spreading like wildfire, especially over here on the other side of the pond here. And if some kid over in New Jersey, he hears about this, but he's kind of like working on either trying to record your voice or he's trying to put electric light bulbs onto every light post in New York City. So he's kind of like really interested, Thomas Edison, but he doesn't really have the time to do it, but he knows this is something big. So he assigns one of his assistants, a guy by the name of William Dixon. So now what William Dixon does is Dixon goes up to Rochester, New York. Rochester, New York was like the centerpiece of where photography was located. And he went to the Eastman Kodak studios because he wanted to find a way to somehow get photographs to where they could be together and we can kind of flip them or see them where that persistence of vision will make it look like the pictures are in motion. Motion pictures. Or moving pictures. Well, we call them movies for short. And so they came up with this chemical called celluloid. Now, celluloid is what is made into film. So the celluloid allowed all these pictures to be strung together so that you would put them into a projector, that had a light, and you could project onto a wall as each still photo was coming by. And of course you did it at a rapid pace so that it looked like there was motion pictures. So of course, in 1896, the Edison studios, and it took them that long. This was not an easy task. You go from 1878 when they first made this bet all the way to 1896 before they finally get the celluloid and they're able to perfect it. And of course, the first ever movie was a guy sneezing. That was it. It's actually in our National Archives. And then, of course, Edison did all kinds. Now, by the 1890s, we got light bulbs all over the place. We can record your voice, no problem. Now it's time to get into these moving pictures. And Edison goes crazy, and he starts making these little shorts here and there. He actually starts putting them into what they call kinetoscopes, where you could actually, go to a place called a Nickelodeon, because you'd put a nickel into this box and you'd turn the handle, and it would string these photos along, and you would actually, for 30 seconds, watch something happening, whether it's somebody throwing a ball to one another, somebody fighting, somebody chasing somebody, but you could watch these things. And people, you talk about Nickelodeon as being busy, people just absolutely loved the motion picture. Because, again, what I've always said to you guys, we are a visually entertained people, or a being, species. We love to be visually entertained. Radio, it's great. But we love being entertained visually. That's why you got all those Greek theaters. That's why Shakespeare is so very well known. That's why there were theaters all over the place where plays would go on in the 1890s, because we wanted to be visually entertained. But now you've got this. The problem is that they were all little short ones. And so finally in 1903, Thomas Edison Studios produces what's called The Great Train Robbery. Now, The Great Train Robbery is only 10.5 minutes long. But it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. It has a whole story to it. But what's more is, because you could now film it, you could take the camera on location. See, up to this point, if you were being visually entertained, it was on a stage with a play. So if you wanted to go from the house out into a park, you had to drop the curtain, guys in the back would have to switch the set around, and you'd have to pretend now you're at a park. Don't have to do that anymore. Now the camera goes where we want it to go. And here was the camera going out on the prairie called Fort Lee, New Jersey, which is where The Great Train Robbery was filmed, and you have the first full-length motion picture. Like I said, a storyline with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And people went wild for it. Now all of a sudden, a lot of these theaters that were host to vaudeville shows and other plays and even burlesque shows were now dropping that big old, king-size sheet from the ceiling, and you were now projecting motion pictures onto the sheet, and people were coming to see the movies. And they came in droves. Now, in the beginning, you only had things like the Keystone Cops or some other comedy stuff. A lot of very visual comedy was very popular in this silent era, because, of course, you couldn't hear anything. There was no sound. And this, of course, led, because so much of it was physical comedy that you could see and not hear, you see the emergence of this young actor talent from England who wanted to break into the movies here in America, and that was the guy by the name of Charlie Chaplin. And then you also see America's Sweetheart, the first ever female who would actually be prominently featured in a film. And that, of course, is Mary Pickford. Now, the interesting thing about Mary Pickford is she becomes the first person to be allowed to, what we call, be a part of the star system. Now, here's what the star system is. See, we don't think about it today because it happens all the time. I mean, I talked about the movie King Richard. Trust me, they're putting out Will Smith in King Richard. Okay? Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible 85. Okay? That's what the star power is. Denzel Washington in The Equalizer. Or The Executioner, or whatever American made. Or American Mobster. Whatever his last movie was. But Denzel Washington. Because people want to come to see the actor or the actress that's in it. Well, up until Mary Pickford, they would just put the movie, like the name of the movie, or maybe just the name of the production company. It doesn't matter who's in it. I just want to come see it. Well, now with Mary Pickford, you found audiences were now coming to see the show because they wanted to see her in the motion picture. So now, as you see at the beginning of her film from 1917, The Little Princess, you see Mary Pickford in, and you see her name is prominent in the beginning of the movie. So she was the first, and of course, it's still very big today, where people will go to see a motion picture or a moving image, because of who the star is. And the star system is what Mary Pickford leg to get started. Now, a lot of these films still were not very long, but still, an hour is not bad as we got into the middle of the 1915. But by 1915, we had something that was now going to show how the moving image or motion pictures could be controversial. And that was the release in 1915 of the movie Birth of a Nation. Now, Birth of a Nation was over 3 hours long. Birth of a Nation was based on a book called The Klansman. What this movie was about, and based on the book, was you had two families that became very friendly pre-Civil War. One was based in Philadelphia, one was based in the South. But then the Civil War hit, so these two good friends end up being on opposite sides of the Civil War. And there's one battle scene where they see each other. They don't shoot at each other, but they see each other and stuff. And then after the war, you see what happens when the carpetbaggers and some of the Union soldiers come into the South and try to take advantage of the South. And they, of course, had freed slaves. Free slaves were now able to be elected into public office and that kind of thing. Well, that wasn't good for the white people in the South. So suddenly you have the rise of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, which is the ghosts of dead Confederate soldiers. And they come in and they save the day. They're the heroes of the movie. They chase away all the black soldiers that were wearing blue. They chase away all the bad. There was one guy who was half black, half white, who was leading all these bad black guys and bad white guys who were trying to, take advantage of the Southern people. And of course, the Klan were the heroes, and it was just bad. It caused race riots all over America. A new organization called the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, of course the NAACP, just totally denounced the film. But here's the worst part. For the first time ever in 1915, the President of the United States got a private viewing of a motion picture in the White House, and it was Birth of a Nation. Now, at the time, our president was Woodrow Wilson. Now, Woodrow Wilson was the governor of New Jersey. Before that, he was the president of Princeton University. But he's not a Jersey guy. See, he was born in Virginia, and his father was a colonel in the Confederate Army. So as he was growing up, his father would fill his ears with all kinds of things. So that by the time Woodrow Wilson was in the White House and he viewed this film, it's very well known that he said that this was as accurate a portrayal of history as he could ever see. And a lot of things changed. As a matter of fact, what happened was that now you had the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacy groups now become emboldened. See, the funny thing is, in 1915, when this movie was made, there might have been 5,000 Klansmen in this country. The Klan was dead. See, the Klan pretty much got killed off in the mid-1870s. And by 1915, maybe 5,000 existed all over America. But after Birth of a Nation, by 1924, when the Klan had walked on Washington, that walk alone, there were over 400,000 Klansmen in D.C. And by 1925, I think there were over 6 million Klansmen in America. It was just a dark time in race relations. It set it back so badly. As a matter of fact, in our nation's capital, they had disappeared. But now, after Birth of a Nation, what reappeared were the separate bathrooms, the separate water fountains, and just a really tough time. I've said many times, and I still feel this way, we are the greatest country the world has ever known. But we've had our bumps and bruises, and this was a bad one. This was a real bad one that thankfully we pretty much overcome. I mean, there are no more separate washrooms or anything like that. We got rid of those a long time ago. But another thing that happened was now you see the beginning, after Birth of a Nation, the beginning of the mass migration. This is, as a matter of fact, a young lady several years ago who wrote a book about this appeared at Bergen to speak about her book. And yeah, it started in 1915. And that's when many blacks who, of course, lived in the South, because basically once they were freed slaves, they had really no means to go anywhere else. They became sharecroppers, or they found living down in the South. But of course, you had Jim Crow laws and everything else. They would then migrate north. In 1915, the black population in Detroit, Michigan was only 4%. Only 4% of Detroit, Michigan's population was black in 1915. That just gives you an idea whether it was Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia. They just all had to move up north because they had to escape what was now an emboldened Southern white supremacy. All thanks to a film that the President of the United States thought was an accurate portrayal of history. Oh, God. It took a long time to get over that. It really did. But that's the first time you really see a motion picture, a movie, have an impact on our culture. All right, I'm going to stop it right there. I do have some other clips that are attached to this thread, and we'll talk about them more when I see you again, probably Thursday or Friday. All right, you guys take care.